In this video, I continue to look at appeal decisions focused on deciding the principal elevation on corner houses. The first property is a detached house with a north-facing porch elevation and an east-facing driveway elevation. The appellant applied for a lawful development certificate and LDC for a dormer window on the north elevation, but the council rejected the application, saying that this elevation was the principal elevation. Upon appeal, the inspector observed that both elevations fronted the highway that set the postcode for the house. Comments from the inspector on the north elevation include: there was an array of casements typically found at the front of a house. The soil and rainwater pipework seen here was typically found on the side elevations. First-time visitors would see the door number, entrance, door, porch and path leading to the door when they viewed the north elevation. The only comment made by the inspector on the east elevation was that it was a gable wall with two windows. The inspector agreed with the council that the north elevation was the principal elevation and rejected the appeal. This is a corner property with a north-facing porch elevation and an east-facing narrow elevation. The appellant applied for an LDC to create a gable on the west elevation and dormers to each side, claiming the east elevation was the principal elevation. The council rejected the application, stating the north elevation was the principal elevation. Upon appeal, the inspector observed that the northern elevation was by far the more imposing threshold, due to its significantly greater width, the presence of the front entrance door, and the appearance in general. The eastern elevation, with relatively narrow facade, did not have the appearance or character of a principal elevation, and the inspector rejected the appeal. On first glance, this structure appears to be two semi-detached houses, whereas it is in fact divided into four separate two-storey dwellings, each located at the corner of the block. The appellant owns one of the quarter blocks, which has an attached garden, and the appellant applied for an LDC to erect a detached hobbies room in the garden. The council refused the application on the basis that the building would be situated on land forward of a wall forming the principal elevation of the original dwelling house. The council argued that the rear, i.e. northwest facing wall, was the principal elevation. The inspector noted the northeast elevation fronted the road, the other elevation did not. The northeast elevation included a small window and the main entrance door. The northwest elevation had the main windows of the property. It also had patio doors, but they were for garden access and were not intended as an entrance door. On balance, the inspector assigned the northeast facing elevation as the principal elevation, and the appeal was allowed. I'd say this was a difficult and unusual property to assess, and on balance I think the inspector got this one right. The final property for review has a south-facing elevation towards the driveway and an east-facing elevation towards the roundabout. The appellant applied for an LDC to add two dormer windows, and the council rejected the application, stating that one or both dormers were on a roof slope fronting a highway. The council didn't specify which highway was fronted, and so the appellant submitted two appeals. Let's switch to a 3D model and we can make more sense of the two appeals. I've seen the plans that were attached to the appeals, and in Appeal A, the proposal was for two dormers on the north-facing and the west-facing roof slopes. And Appeal B, the proposal was for a single dormer on the west-facing roof slope. The inspector's first task was to decide the principal elevation. Back to the photos. As both east and south elevations front the same road, the decision rests on a comparison of the main architectural features of each elevation, and what first-time visitors might understand to be the front of the house. Surprisingly, no architectural features are made by the inspector of the east elevation. The inspector concludes that the south elevation is the principal elevation, as it contains the front door and is approached by the entrance door and footpath. And that's the sum of the inspector's assessment. It's the sole architectural commentary, and in my opinion, it seems a very cursory inspection of the property. Although the Google source photos don't permit a full view of the east elevation, they do show an interesting array of windows, a cat-slide roof and a dormer window in the upper half of the east-facing property. We can't see what's in the lower half. In my opinion, the inspector didn't conduct a sufficiently detailed comparison survey of the two elevations, and the inspector might struggle to justify the decision made. However, assuming the principal elevation has been correctly decided as being the south elevation, let's see if the proposed dormers comply with the relevant limitation. B1C says no development can extend beyond the plane of any existing roof slope which forms the principal elevation of the dwelling house and fronts a highway. Switching back to 3D, this is the south elevation, assigned as the principal elevation. It's formed from this roof slope and these walls. This is the only roof slope fronting the highway, and this is the plane of that slope. When we add the dormers, we see that the west dormer is in front of the plane of the slope. For Appeal A, proposing 2 dormers, my personal observation is that the appeal should be dismissed as part of the application is unlawful. For Appeal B, proposing just the west dormer, I believe the appeal should be dismissed as the entire application is unlawful. Let's now turn to the deliberations of the council and inspector. Why did the council refuse the application? It's because one or both dormers would be on a roof slope fronting a highway. Well, this is plainly wrong, isn't it? The question to be asked is whether the development extends beyond the plane of a roof slope forming the principal elevation. It's not whether the development is installed on that roof slope. And did the inspector pick this up? No. This is what the inspector said. As no dormer windows are proposed for this elevation, then B1C is not contravened and the developments proposed in both applications are lawful. The inspector thinks that the dormer window has to be installed on this roof slope to fall foul of the limitation. So not only making the same mistake as the council, but compounding it by allowing both appeals. This is not a difficult case. How can it go wrong? If you know, do add a comment. And if you're thinking of pressing the like or subscribe buttons, thank you. Next week, I'm looking at a few house enlargements towards the highway, and I ask the question, is a garage door a wall? Thanks for watching. See you next week.